Aloha, folks, and welcome to this latest edition of Five Questions. It appears, of course, here on News Radio 830 KHVH on the morning show and also on HawaiiReporter.com right on the front page. So be sure and dial in and log in every day. Our special guest again is Mr. Bill Gertz of the Washington Times, and it is a pleasure to welcome Bill back to Honolulu. Aloha, Bill. How are you?
Hi, good to be on the show.
Thanks so very much. Before we jump in, Bill, can you tell us a little bit about your latest works and what is available for us now in the bookstores?
Well, my latest book was The Failure Factory, which is kind of a primer for the Tea Party before the Tea Party existed, kind of looking at out-of-control government bureaucracy, which is kind of a big problem today. I've been mainly focusing on my weekly Inside the Ring column, so that's kind of been the focus of my efforts of late.
Excellent. And where can we find Inside the Ring?
It's on my website. It's called The Gertz File. It's gertzfile.com, GERTZFILE.com.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad that we have some time with you today. We chatted several months ago, and boy, there sure has been a lot that has transpired. We have great concerns here in Hawaii about areas such as Iran, our first topic of conversation and our first questions. What is the very latest of what's taking place in Iran and in this apparent explosion that took place at a nuclear missile facility there? Can you round out this story for us, please, Bill?
Sure. I think leading up to all this was a fairly revelatory International Atomic Energy Agency report, which was made public. Not really made public, but released a couple of weeks ago, which for the first time provided all of the intelligence details of Iran's unexplained nuclear weapons program. And I think this kind of dropped the veil that was being used by the Iranians to claim that they didn't have a weapons program, that they were only building nuclear power for electrical power generation. That set off quite a bit of tension in the Middle East, and you had a number of reports out of Israel indicating that the Israelis were preparing for some type of action against Iran. And then recently we had this somewhat mysterious explosion in Isfahan, which is a location of one of the nuclear facilities. There have been conflicting reports as to whether this blast actually set back the nuclear program or not, but it appears, and again, this is kind of a shadow war against Iran, that someone took some steps to sabotage one of these facilities in Iran.
You know, what does that really mean for us here at home? Because the speculation to Iran utilizing nuclear weaponry in response to perhaps Israel or others, I mean, this reminds us a great deal of the arms race of days gone by, doesn't it?
Very troubling. The big concern is that Iran already has a number of missiles, and they are also believed to have had the technology that proliferated with a Pakistani supplier network a number of years ago on how to make a small nuclear warhead for a missile. So what's left then? You need fissile material, basically, because that's really the core of a nuclear warhead. So, and the Iranians have been announcing that they're doing feverish work on centrifuges, which spin this uranium hexafluoride gas into highly enriched uranium. So, yeah, I think the picture over there is fairly troubling. I don't think the Israelis are going to conduct an attack anytime soon, but perhaps maybe next spring when the U.S. is more fully out of Iraq, when they might have a more free path to overfly that country and try to knock out or at least limit the Iranian nuclear program.
Understanding that we have just 5 questions, but it does kind of beg a question on this topic, and that is, who is supplying Iran with the materials that are necessary all the way from the hardware to the fissionable material itself?
It's a combination of things. I think they got a lot from the Russians. The Russians built their nuclear power station at Bushehr, and they've managed to siphon off some of that. This covert supplier network that I mentioned, we know that the AQCON network from Pakistan provided them with stuff. Plus, there's been a lot of evidence that European companies have been providing what they call dual-use equipment. That is, equipment that ostensibly may have non-nuclear uses but can be used by the Iranians for nuclear development.
I had a caller on my program that accused Halliburton from supplying and supplying and making available materials that Iran has used in their pursuit of nuclear armaments. Is that a true statement?
Don't know about that, but I do know that a lot of the major European companies, the Germans, some of the Swiss and the Belgians that have high-tech companies, they have been definitely involved in equipment that could be used by Iran.
We're talking with Mr. Bill Gertz, of course, reporter for the Washington Times. You can find him on gertzfile.com, Gertz file.com, and The Failure Factory, which is now in paperback. So you can find in bookstores everywhere. We mentioned Israel for question number 2. Let's jump on over to Israel. And with Benjamin Netanyahu at the reins, is there any chance that Israel may issue a preemptive strike, say, with Iran, given that Netanyahu is leader of the country?
It's very possible, and in fact, there's been a number of indicators that the Israeli government may be preparing the public in Israel for some type of action, and this has come out in some statements identifying the danger posed by the Iranian nuclear program. But as I said, I spoke with a very senior U.S. official not too long ago who said that there are big concerns about Israel going after the nuclear program in Iran, but that it won't happen now, maybe in a few months. And the other problem there is I think the Israelis and the U.S. understand that any kind of military action is not going to be able to knock out the program. It's spread throughout the country. I think the number is 23 different sites. Many of them are underground facilities that are hardened against attack, although Israel does have these bunker buster penetrating bombs. But it's a very real possibility, I think, in the next few months that Israel will try to set back the program. It's not going to be like it was in Syria, where they were able to knock out that North Korean facility located at a place called Al-Kabar.
Right, I remember. The diss over the microphone, open mic, by both President Obama and Sarkozy, it was fodder for late-night comedy, but it struck me being more severe than that. What did that event speak to you about?
Well, I think it highlights the left-wing orientation of the Obama regime, that they feel that they're not going to be as close to Israel as successive past administrations have been. It's just kind of a lot of pressure has been coming from the political left, especially in the U.S., for the U.S. to distance itself from Israel, which has been a long, close, traditional ally in the Middle East.
We're talking with Bill Gertz and enjoying our 5 questions with him today on KHVH Radio and also on HawaiiReporter.com. When we talk about China with topic number 3, recent increases in naval exercises, they have come out and criticized the United States and Australia with their newly forged military kind of partnership here. China's been a little quiet for some of us who've been watching. What's the very latest there, Bill?
Well, the Chinese strategy right now is to be very quiet as they prepare for a major leadership transition, which is probably going to happen sometime in the fall of next year, when the current leader, Hu Jintao, is going to be replaced by the vice president, someone named Xi Jinping. What's been going on around the periphery of China, it continues to be fairly alarming to the states in the region. And a lot of people are very closely monitoring China's activities, which, as you mentioned, seem to be subsiding a little bit. The good news is that, and this is something that I've reported on extensively, the Pentagon recently announced to very little fanfare in most of the press that we have a new strategy towards countering China. It's called the Air-Sea Battle Concept, and it involves combining U.S. Air Forces with U.S. Navy forces. The U.S. Pacific Command was intimately involved with developing this new plan. again, it's directed right at the Chinese to counter the Chinese military buildup, and it involves both military activities and bolstering forces in the region as well as increasing alliances. And the most visible example of this was the recent announcement that the U.S. would set up a Marine Corps base on the northern tip of Australia with the Australian military there. So that's a positive development.
Talking with Bill Gertz, of course, of the Washington Times, and log on to Gertz File, Gertz file.com, and you'll learn the very latest from Bill. One other area we mentioned earlier as well, and that's Pakistan, and this latest fallout in regard to NATO and also with the United States with the Pakistani military and the loss of life on their side. Boy, we're getting such a convoluted message from all around as to what, A, really transpired, and B, what the impact is going to be. Can you clear this up for us, Bill, please?
Well, sure. The NATO bombed some Pakistani troops on the border, and highlight and the latest reports are that that this was some type of a provocation. In other words, there was some use of deception or something that involved triggering this attack. And it has, of course, created an outrage in Pakistan. And, Pakistan is a reluctant ally in the war on terrorism. The U.S. is really reliant on Pakistan for the ability to conduct some of these really effective drone strikes, which have decimated the top al-Qaeda leadership and its rank and file as well. So we're stuck dealing with the Pakistanis. They're under pressure from a very strong insurgent Islamist, both political and terrorist force in the country to move that country in a more Islamist direction. So, we're kind of hanging on to Pakistan, and this latest incident with the NATO attack on Pakistani troops has really complicated things.
And our association and working relationship, if not out of affection, for want of a better word, is really very important to our country, is it not?
Yes, it is. And, there have been calls in Congress that we should cut off funds to Pakistan. And again, we get a benefit from them, despite the fact that the Pacs are kind of playing a double game in a lot of ways. Their intelligence service has a unit that is closely linked to some of the terrorist groups in Pakistan as well as in Afghanistan next door.
Final point today, Bill, and that has to do, I did want to chat about Hawaii for just a moment, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Medvedev and Russia and the recent announcement about the deploying of new missiles targeting U.S. facilities and allies.
Yes.
My goodness. I mean, again, it's almost everything old is new again. Yeah.
Things are going south with the Russians, and the Obama administration is infatuated with the notion of arms control. They believe that that's the basis to security, is to do an arms control agreement. The problem is that when we do these agreements, the U.S. abides by them, and the Russians usually cheat. And when they cheat, nothing happens. Just 2 weeks ago, the U.S. said that it was giving up providing data on the conventional forces in Europe treaty because the Russians had violated it. The administration has been engaged with missile defense talks to try to reach some cooperative agreement with Moscow. And Moscow has dug in its heels and demanded that the U.S. provide legally binding assurances that U.S. missile defenses wouldn't target Russia. And the U.S. has said, no, we're not going to limit our missile defenses based on misguided Russian fears about these missile defenses in Europe, which are really aimed at countering Iran's long-range missiles. So that's really the issue. And it came to a head last week. The Russians announced a lot of saber rattling. They've reactivated a radar and are now threatening to move new missiles into the southern and western part of Russian territory.
It's an amazing story as it all unfolds. And, I know there's a lot of uncertainty in the financial markets, but my goodness, when you talk about national security and defense, it seems that there's more in play here, and it's more in flux than ever before.
Yeah, yes.
In Hawaii, and finally, Bill, if you wouldn't mind, in Hawaii, we have, of course, our long-term serving Senator Inouye, who has watched ever so vigilantly over Hawaii when it comes to most issues, especially defense. What's the level of commitment to the military defense presence here in Hawaii, Bill? Has that changed under the Obama administration? And do you foresee any movement regarding Hawaii if, in fact, there would be a new incoming administration?
That's a good question. Basically, the good news is, again, that President Obama, during his recent visit to Asia, announced a major shift in focus towards the Asia-Pacific region. And I think that means that Hawaii is going to become even more strategically important than it already is. And I already mentioned the air-sea battle concept, and PACOM playing a major role in that. But also, they're going to be building up forces and alliances in Asia as part of this air-sea battle concept. And this has really been in response to the fears of many Asian allies, including the Japanese and the South Koreans and the Filipinos and the Australians. And, you go along the periphery of China. They're all concerned about China's growing aggressiveness and assertiveness. And just this week, in fact, just yesterday, the Chinese announced that they were conducting the second sea trial for their new aircraft carrier. This is a new power projection capability that they didn't have before. It's not really going to be directed at the U.S. It could be, but it's really going to be trying to drive the U.S. out of Asia. And of course, our allies there want us very much to remain engaged in Asia.
Fantastic as always, Bill. Thank you so very much for the updates and also the insight. Remind us where we can find you at Gertz File, and what will we see when we get there?
Well, I'm working on a pretty interesting story tomorrow on some arms control negotiations that are going to restart, and that'll be an interesting story for everyone to look out for.
Be sure and take a look. It's called Inside the Ring, and of course, The Failure Factory, which is now in paperback, can be found at bookstores everywhere, or you can just click on the link at gertzfile.com and order your copy from Amazon.com. So, Bill, thank you very much as always. We hope to chat soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.